Welcome to today's webinar on data interoperability, connecting the dots in a digital ecosystem. My name is Marcy Jang, Director of Professional Investment at COSN. And thank you again for joining us. Just a little bit about COSN. We are the only national association for school system technology leaders, and we support them by providing the management, community building, and efficacy tools and resources they need to develop innovative digital learning environments for all students. We want to thank our corporate partners for supporting this webinar series and just always being dedicated to COSN's mission. We're very excited for today, and we have a great group of panelists. But first, I want to note that this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on the COSN website in about a week. And also, if you have registered, I will follow up with an email with the recording link, the PowerPoint slides, and a very short survey to let us know how we did in the webinar and to give us any topics that you would like to see in a future webinar. And also, I think there are several resources that we'll also provide. We encourage everyone to ask questions and provide comments in the chat box, and the panelists could address them along the way, or we'll have Q&A at the end to answer those questions. And if you don't answer those questions, please feel free to get in touch with any of the panelists. Their info will be at the end of the presentation. So right now, I want to introduce our moderator for the webinar, Paula Malon. She is a COSN project director, and she has been leading our work on interoperability for a number of years. So Paula's going to talk all about it, of course, to share what we've done, and I will just hand it over to her. Thank you, Paula.
Hey, thank you, Marcy. And really my main role today is to really welcome our panelists who are going to be sharing their real world experiences and insights on increasing interoperability within their district's digital ecosystems. So as you see there, we're going in order. First up is Chris Hagel. Chris has worked at Peninsula School District in Washington State for the past 12 years and currently serves as the Executive Director of Digital Learning. He is a visionary educational technology administrator and implementer known regionally and nationally for delivering innovative technology solutions to improve the education of students. Chris is a certified educational technology leader with a degree in computer science. His extensive understanding of the technology needs of staff and students in the educational environment enable Chris to provide the leadership necessary to implement appropriate solutions. Next, we have Pete Just. Formerly a biology teacher, Pete taught high school science and media for 13 years. Currently, Pete serves as CTO and COO at the Metropolitan School District of Wayne Township in Indianapolis, Indiana, where he developed and led the township's technology application of Universal Design for Learning by creating digital learning spaces in over 1,000 district classrooms. With the support of his team, Wayne Township has successfully created and maintained environments to allow students multiple pathways to graduation, enabling their long-term success. Pete is a founding chairman of the Indiana Chief Technology Officers Council, was in the first class of certified educational technology leaders, a charter member of the Indiana Department of Education's e-learning leadership cadre, and is the current chair of COSN's own board of directors. And our final panelist is Dr. Barbara Nesbitt. Barbara is a lifetime educator with more than 30 years in education. She's been a teacher, instructional coach, administrator, and consultant with broad experiences in school districts in Virginia and South Carolina. Barbara is currently the Assistant Superintendent for Technology Services for the School District of Pickens County in upstate South Carolina. In this role, Barbara led the district's transformation of instructional technology from a bring-your-own-device district to a one-to-one district with a fully interoperable digital ecosystem implementing the IMS global standards. Under Barbara's leadership, Pickens received federal funds for a leased dark fiber ring network, which is expected to future-proof the district's broadband needs for decades. So thanks all of you for making the time to participate in today's webinar. And just before we get started, I wanted to provide a little bit of general background information on interoperability and, of course, COSN's new interoperability toolkit. So interoperability is defined as a seamless sharing of data, content, and services among systems or applications. But the real key to understanding interoperability and explaining why it's important is contained in the word itself, ability. Ability to readily access data, ability to reallocate resources, ability to give your teachers and IT departments their Sundays back, ability to keep data secure, and ability to ensure data quality. As you all know, K-12 education institutions are increasingly looking to digital content and related e-learning technologies to meet the evolving education needs and goals. And yet, as educators grow more sophisticated in the use of technology, there are gaps in the integration and interfaces among disparate applications. COSIN has developed an interoperability toolkit to help districts increase the interoperability of their academic and operational systems. You can access the toolkit via that link shown, and I encourage everyone to take a look at the components. So I'm not going to go through all the components, but I did want to highlight a key one, the interoperability maturity model. While it's pretty illegible here on the screen, in real life, it's really quite helpful. We discovered that interoperability meant different things to different IT leaders, and we didn't have a framework to really talk about interoperability. It was kind of seen as an all or nothing proposition or just something for large, well-resourced districts to address. So we created this model to show the stages of interoperability going from initial to transformative with definitions of what that looks like for each of the functional areas: teaching and learning and administrative functions, leadership and vision, IT governance, data governance, information and system integration, and infrastructure. So I encourage everyone to take a look at the version on that URL that we provided, and it's actually readable and quite helpful. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Chris to talk a little bit about his district.
Thanks, Paula. My name is Chris Hagel. I'm from the Peninsula School District. We're about an hour south of Seattle, suburban Seattle, Puget Sound area. We currently have 15 schools. We're actually growing fairly substantially for us right now. And so we're going to be opening 2 new schools in the next, one next year and one the year after. So that's pretty exciting for us. As Paula talked about the interoperability model, while we have been, working on data interoperability for years, we're still kind of at a emerging level in many of the categories. Some are kind of emerging to integrated, but some are still in the initial stages of it. So, we've been on this journey for a while, but still got a long ways to go. So I think that's an easy, quick introduction for me.
Okay, I think next up we've got Pete.
Hi, we're from Indianapolis, Indiana. Wayne Township's on the west side. So if you know where the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is, I can hear that from my parking lot. So we're pretty close to that. We also are growing actually in a county that a lot of schools are seeing reductions in their students. We just actually saw a 400 student increase, so we're almost at 17,000. And in terms of our interoperability experience, we've kind of been a part of IMS Global and the IDFI initiatives over the last 5 to 7 years, depending on what specifics you're talking about. We believe strongly that it could provide a good improvement over our current processes, and looking forward to talking a little bit about how that might happen. We're a pretty high free reduced lunch district, and so quite a bit of poverty, and we're always looking for innovative ways to provide easier access for our students, our families, and to increase their chances of success. And we think Interop has a big part to play in that.
And Barbara, do you want to tell us a little bit about your district?
Sure. The school district of Pickens County is located in upstate South Carolina. We're a bedroom community of Greenville, South Carolina, which is smack between Charlotte and Atlanta, which is a really growing region of the country. If you follow college football at all, Clemson University is in our county, so that in the town of Clemson is one of 4 of our major cities, with the others would be Eastleigh, Liberty, and Pickens. We are a mix of urban and rural, 500 square miles. So, you know, half of our county is entirely rural, which 30 minutes from the nearest grocery store. But yet we have, you know, 4 fairly large cities. So we're very mixed. And we've been on the interoperability journey for about 6 years and have a fairly robust digital ecosystem that's very interoperable. And our big need right now is just getting data from multiple sources back into a single data warehouse for teachers to make a decision at kind of the standards level for reteaching. So that's the big push that we have right now with interoperability.
Okay. Well, thanks, everyone. I appreciate sort of providing that background. And to get the conversation started, I thought I'd start with a question that addresses the main benefit of interoperability, its impact on teaching and learning. And Pete, as COSIN's board chair, I thought I would start with you. How is interoperability helping you to achieve COSIN's vision of empowering every learner to achieve their unique potential in a changing world?
Well, for us, I guess I'd say that for us, the way we look at interoperability is it's really a better on-ramp to centralized digital content, easier rostering, and data dashboards from our perspective. So if you think about those things, these are standards-based systems that allow vendors and districts like us to kind of come around common goals and ways to get there. So the way it practically plays out for us is trying to find an easier way for students to get to the plethora of digital resources that we're starting to provide to them. I think we all have seen what's happened over the last 5 to 10 years with our curriculum instruction and assessment teams adopting a lot of digital resources, vendors moving from selling textbooks to selling digital content and providing textbooks, class sets, and things like that for free. And so as that's happened, the ecosystem has grown so that it's really pretty confusing. And how a student gets to their math or social studies, digital resources could be pretty complicated, and that complication creates a barrier. And so we see Interop as an opportunity to tear down that barrier. And then for the teachers and administrators on the data side, we see interoperability as a way to provide them with common dashboards, metrics, pulling together disparate data sources from multiple products into one place and providing early warning systems and ways to really kind of trigger interventions, differentiated instruction, whatever might be needed to help that student become successful. Because really our goal is to help all of our students achieve their God-given potential. And that kind of aligns with this comment here. And I think that these are some tools that can help us to get there.
Thank you. Chris, I know you're sort of in the initial emerging area, but do you want to share any of your thoughts about, how it's helping you at this stage?
Sure. Yeah, we're kind of working right now on a consistent learning model across our district. And so a lot of that is going to be based on what sometimes is termed as personalized learning, learner-centered. I heard you mention earlier things about universal design for learning. And so having data at our fingertips to help provide differentiated instruction for every student is really what we're looking at, and data interoperability is critical for that, to be able to pull all of the data we need from all of the different sources that it's out there and available. So, that's how we see it, and how we see it as an important piece of what we're doing instructionally as well.
And Barbara, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk through how you address this in Pickens County. You provided a very snappy graphic for us.
Absolutely. And I wanted to share this graphic because it's something that we work together with our instructional team as well as our technology team. But it's really about, as you said, empowering learners, student-centered learners. Kind of the red circle refers to their learning environment, which we want to be safe, engaging, responsive, and flexible. And so for us, flexible learning environments means that students have a career pathway, a graduation pathway that may not be brick and mortar, very traditional. It may be a combination of virtual learning, work-based learning opportunities, project-based learning. They may only physically be in a building for one class, their junior year, or maybe they're taking all of their classes online, even though they're engaged in relationships with our teachers. And the green represents the curriculum, instruction, and assessment, which we want to be rigorous, relevant, and relational. And we don't know how any of that takes place without technology, without a digital ecosystem that is interoperable and flexible. So if our goal is to empower learners to meet their potential with however we personalize or differentiate the pathway to get them to where they need to be college or career ready, then we need to make sure that we are giving as many opportunities for choice to teachers and students. And we believe that an interoperable digital ecosystem provides that flexible, choice-driven environment to give them, as many different ways of helping kids meet their potential.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions about this graphic or about anything regarding other speakers' comments? So if you do, just you've got that little chat box there. You can enter questions anytime. So the next question is about the drivers for making your systems interoperable. Can you talk about a specific pain point that forced you to take this on?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I kind of mentioned it a little bit in my earlier comment, and just kind of to give specifics, we're talking pretty high level right now, but several years ago, we were in the midst of an adoption, and we were not as connected with our curriculum team as we are now. And they pulled together groups of teachers and really kind of independently made decisions on what they were going to use as instructional material. And as it turned out, we adopted a whole lot of digital content. And even though, I won't mention the vendor, even though 30 of these products were from one vendor in that 1 year, none of them had a similar method to rostering. None of them had a similar method to managing the content. Each of them was kind of its own product that stood alone. And when they notified us, which is how it happened back then, of this adoption, we panicked. We said, there's not an easy way for us to get this to work for all of you. We have to work through each one of these products independently to figure out how to get students in the systems. And as it turns out, it looks like a couple of these even require teachers to hand roster all of their classes, which obviously is crazy. And that was a really difficult pain point that we hit, where it put us on our heels, and we really realized we had to do something and be more intentional about how we did adoptions. So that changed our adoption process, but it also introduced the value of looking into, in that case, IMS global standards, and providing direction for vendors that are responding to our RFPs in terms of what we're looking for. And so we found that the standards in regard to IMS Global's thin common cartridge, and so on, allowed us to provide additional guidance and have some better conversations in district to be able to set a better path for ourselves moving forward and set expectations in terms of how vendors should be providing us a certain, I guess I'll say, package. So that's a little bit of a long story, but for us, it was very real and it was very painful. And so it began some really great conversations that have led us to where we are today and where we're going in the future.
Excellent. And have you worked with your vendors are they on board now also with implementing the standards? Are they on that journey, or have you used another vendor?
Well, we actually were dealing with a couple of vendors. That adoption was 3. So unfortunately, this is really complex. It's complex because of the nature of all the subject matter that's taught and the different levels, and therefore the many, many adoptions that happen every single year. But we're moving in the same direction. And for me to say the vendors are on board, I think would be awfully optimistic. But I do think that it's becoming clearer and clearer in terms of what we won't accept and who we won't work with as we move through each and every year.
Okay. Chris, is that similar? Was rostering your driver as well?
Rostering was a driver. I think for us, it was more single sign-on. Having students have to have multiple different passwords, having staff having to have multiple different passwords and usernames was really, for us, a big driver for this work to get started. I mean, it was a long time ago that we started, and we're still not there now, but there are so many more vendors that realize that that's a problem, that they're really tackling that with, a couple of different standards, and some of them are just vendor-based choices, but at least it's an option so that our students are really working off of, one single login, one single place to go, and then they can launch off into all of their different curriculum at that point.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Chris. And I guess I didn't finish my thought completely, because that's really our first step, is providing a much better onboarding, working with the HR team of all of our staff as well as students. And really, it took us about 1.5 years to get to the point where we were able to onboard students and staff in a matter of a couple hours, as opposed to a couple of days, or in worst case scenarios, even a couple of weeks. But that identity automation piece is huge, and it's a great first step.
Before we go to Barbara, I just there's a note or a question from Vince about vendors. I don't know if you can see that, vendors in the industry on where are they in the roadmap to interoperability. Can any of you speak to ClassLink or any of the others?
Well, we don't use ClassLink, but I do think that one place to look is the Project Unicorn vendor sign-on. Unfortunately, a lot of these things, just like student data privacy sign-ons by vendors, are pretty general. And so I think it really takes a bit of specific questioning to really understand if they're really on board, and also talking to other districts in terms of their experience. There's not really a great centralized place that I know of where you can find specific vendors and how they might comply with IMS Global or EdFi standards.
And this is Barbara. We actually do use ClassLink, and ClassLink is fully interoperable with both LTI and with OneRoster. And they actually have a OneRoster server component with a REST API that works beautifully inside of their product, where you select the exact courses that you want to send to specific vendors. So you're not sending 100% of your database to the vendor. So if you have a Algebra 1 product, you're only sending the Algebra 1 rosters to that particular vendor. And you can check out on all of the vendors' roadmaps to interoperability on the IMS Global Product Directory website.
Okay. Thank you, Barbara. And then, as I understand it, in terms of answering this question, that the BYOD initiative was a driver for you. Can you talk us through some of the issues that you faced?
Well, just like Chris and Pete, we really started with the single sign-on and the how do we identify users and get them access to their applications? So about 7-8 years ago, we started down the road of BYOD. And for us at the time, coming out of the recession where we did not have funds on the capital side for a one-to-one initiative, BYOD was a solution that was better than nothing. And so we did BYOD for a couple of years with I would say limited success. Again, it was better than nothing, but it's a real challenge. BYOD is a real challenge for teachers because they are having to deal with multiple devices and multiple operating systems. One of the challenges that we faced as we went into BYOD, moving from a Windows environment where we distributed applications through a student menu and a teacher menu. And we were moving away from that into this BYOD environment, and now we're one-to-one. How do you have kids log into the applications you want when you can no longer rely on a student menu? And we didn't want to go out and put all the URLs onto a website and then just directing them to just the URLs was really the first step. And then from there, how do we have the URLs get us a one login, a one place to go with, they log in one time and they're into everything they need. And that really got us to single sign-on. And for us, we adopted ClassLink. We had seen it around, with other in other school environments, and was a beautiful solution for us for BYOD. And then as we moved into one-to-one, as a one place for everybody where they go to sign in. And now we actually use it with our young kids who have a hard time remembering, a robust login and a very secure password when we use a QR code that they keep at school, and we have one at home. They use with a camera, and then that one login gets them into all of their applications without remembering URLs and their login credentials. So for us, it was about managing the app deployment, the URL across, different operating systems and logins, which really led then to how do we authenticate users into these platforms. And then the one roster, the rostering problem was huge as well, as we adopted more and more digital content, and you have all of these different rostering rules. So one roster helped us tremendously. And I have to say that the ed tech industry has really bought into the interoperability standards. And, over time, they have more and more of their products are coming on board with, one roster LTI, and it's just made it easier for us to integrate it into our ecosystem.
I don't know. Thank you, Barbara. I don't know if you saw some questions since we got down the sort of the one roster hole there. If you can answer that question about identity management in one roster, if you could speak to the, answer that note from Christina.
Well, the identity management is like when we use ClassLink, different applications follow different rules. Some of them manage identity management through Active Directory, and then when you go off into their platform from ClassLink, they're managed in their classrooms through one roster. Some exact same thing with LTI for identity management, and they're rostered inside with one roster, so they get to their applications and their textbooks that way. Some of the identity management is done through one roster. So there's multiple ways of managing the identity management as we use Link, but one roster actually can manage the identity management itself inside their specs. I don't know if that helps or not, or if the others want to respond.
I'll just move on for the sake of time, and if we have time at the end, we can maybe delve more into some specs. There's a question from Sam about system integration using various standards, and so that's a very long answer. So I'll just get to the next question, which is really non-technical, which is, how do you work with academic departments and non-IT stakeholders? As we see from the questions coming up, and we've talked about, interoperability, is a very technical issue, yet the outcomes are very non-technical. How do you talk about, the importance of this and working with academic departments and the non-IT folks that are important to making interoperability successful in your district? And Barbara, it's okay with you. I'll start with you next, just because you again have provided.
Absolutely. So this is an image of our digital ecosystem, and it has the kind of the technical things on the left-hand side and the instructional things at the top. And our main platforms for our interoperable digital ecosystem is our single sign-on with ClassLink. We use Safari Montage as a place to store our textbook cartridges, purchased and free resources, and Schoology is our LMS. So whether we are doing whole group instruction, small group instruction, or personalized one-on-one instruction, those products and platforms work for us. And we worked with our instructional team so that they understand the importance of making sure all of their products work with single sign-on. We'll work either in ClassLink or in Schoology or Safari Montage as far as landing in an object repository, and are easy to build out inside of Schoology. And the philosophy of our instructional team is not to tell teachers how to use their web applications, but to make it easy for them to use web applications in the way they see fit, whether they're doing whole group, small group, or individual instruction. So for example, we have teachers who log into ClassLink and they go directly from ClassLink out to EasyBridge for a Pearson textbook, and they're using Pearson EasyBridge website. We have other teachers who may teach the exact same subject area that go from ClassLink into Schoology as our learning management system. And then they build something inside of Schoology in their daily build that is maybe a cartridge out. It's in Safari Montage. It's brought back into their build. So they're asking kids not to go out to the publisher's platform, but to do a specific video or PDF or audio file inside of Schoology. And so we don't want to tell our teachers how to use web applications and digital resources. We just want it to be easy for them to use, for their users to authenticate to their platform. And ultimately, the thing we're working on now that we're not quite there on is being able to bring data back from all these multiple various platforms into a data warehouse to provide actionable information for teachers.
Okay, thank you. And Sam, that may help, at least for Pickens County, answer some of your questions about the various standards that are being used between repositories. So that was a very well-timed slide, Barbara. Chris or Pete, do you have anything to say about, how your structure, works, or how you've, managed any, leadership issues with pulling other or informing other stakeholders
Sure.
that are not in your IT department?
Sure, I'll go first on this one because we just made a really drastic change here in our district last spring. We actually merged all of our academic departments and technology together. So we merged curriculum, teaching and learning, professional development, assessment, and technology all into one department now as the Department of Learning and Innovation. And that is co-led by myself and our other executive director who was in charge of the curriculum side. And so it's really nice now. We're all in the same building. We're all in the same room. We sit right next to each other every day. And so our instructional technology assistant director took a role that's more overseeing curriculum. And so we're really merging everybody together. It makes these discussions and these conversations so much easier. I know that's not an option for everybody, but for us, it's working really well. And so we're seeing more and more of this now. We're starting some of our first adoptions now as a larger team. And so we're having these discussions that we've never really done a great job of having before. It was always kind of, oh, we're going to pick this vendor and we'll, can you support it at the end? And it was kind of a yes or no question. And now we're looking at it from the beginning, technology and curriculum wise. And, we're assessing everything together as one large group. So kind of what we're doing.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Pete,
that's.
what do you do in your in your district?
Yeah, I think we're hearing there's an essential need for cross-functional teams in creating vision, providing leadership, and creating structures for adoption and implementation of resources. I love Barbara's chart, and I think this is a great thing to have a visual, to have conversations around. And as Chris was saying, I think physical proximity and regular cross-functional team meetings around monthly goals, annual goals, and entering into and coming out of a process of adoption, I think is really critical. So I know that that's difficult for many, but for us, we have intentionally kept our e-learning team and right next to and kind of built into our curriculum instruction and assessment teams kind of area of the education center. And we do have someone that I guess I'd say is embedded as a member of our e-learning team with the curriculum instruction and assessment team. They have many meetings to discuss things that are coming up and things that are in process. And she's there kind of informing them and then bringing back to the IT services side information about what's coming and what we should get ready for. And also, soliciting input on decisions that are in process. And if we've got options, what those are. And it's really led to a really nice diagram. I guess I should have thought ahead to put it up here, that we have in terms of when we do an adoption. We actually have discovered that there's 5 different ways that we can do rostering and that we can do adoptions. And each one of them has its benefits and each one of them has its downfalls. And so now we have kind of a way visually to think about it and to say, okay, well, we don't like these options over here to the right because they're much more painful and require a lot more work of our staff on an annual basis. What can we do to shift to the left in terms of these options and do a better job rostering and do a better job providing content in easy to access locations? And I think when you have those types of systems in place, physical proximity, regular meetings, ways to talk about the challenges and define what the options are, I think you really start to be able to make a lot of progress.
That's great. And although you didn't supply it now as a follow-up, if you're game, you can share that graphic with us and we can include it in the handout and follow-up audio that we're going to send to participants. So
will do.
So how do you work with the standards bodies? And I know, Barbara, you're actually, you mentioned that you're actually at an IMS meeting that you're ducking out of to join this. Pete, you've mentioned IMS. You've actually won an award using LMS interoperability to power and drive student-centered learning. You also mentioned EdFi. Can you talk a little bit about how you work with the standards bodies and why you feel that's important?
Sure. Yeah, matter of fact, I'm in Austin today meeting with the EdFi Assessment Data Management Governance Committee. So we've got meetings today and tomorrow here and at the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation. And so I think one of the things is just to become a member. And even if you don't want to pay for that, on the IMS side, you certainly can track what's going on. On the EdFi side, licenses are free, but obviously license is just step one. There's many steps to get a system in place, but there's a lot of great resources out there. It's just a matter of wanting to and being willing to find them. Our work, like I said, has been with IMS Global. On that side of the house, I have an e-learning team member who's in charge of virtual and blended learning, and she's our direct contact and goes to the IMS Global meetings. She's a member of a couple of subcommittees, as am I, or task forces and things of that nature. And just like anything, whether it's COSIN or whether it's another organization, you just have to step forward and be willing to look at it. I'll tell you, there's a lot of resources out there to dig through. So it's good to find a district that's doing it and try to maybe take a look at what they've done. I think that's really helpful. And on the EdFi side for us, we just we realized that this was a great way to pull a lot of disparate data sources together. But I'll tell you, all of these things are a little bit of a heavy lift, and you really have to have people in charge. So on the EdFi side, it's my data systems manager. On the IMS Global side, we have the e-learning and blended person that's in charge of that. And then I kind of hover above that and kind of help in any way I can and push initiatives forward. So I guess what I'm saying is take some time, create some systems in your district focused around what your goals are, and then just start doing research and talking to people.
Great. And Barbara, I know you actually sit on the executive board of directors for IMS Global, and I know in just putting this meeting together or these slides together that you're a very busy woman. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to dedicate your time to the standards body?
Absolutely. To me, it's just the work matters. And having come out of the classroom, my background is in elementary, early childhood. If you can't tell from my focus on visuals today, I think that it matters. Teachers want systems to work together. They want ease of use. They don't want to waste time standing over children as they're helping them find URLs and log in credentials. They want actionable data back in a way that's easy for them to understand. And if you listen to your teachers, you'll know that the work that the standards bodies are doing is critically important. But it's like Pete said, it can be a heavy lift. The standards are similar to plumbing and electricity that's hidden in the walls. You can't imagine operating a school without plumbing or electricity. And access to broadband and interoperable digital ecosystems it's not, attractive work. It's hard work. It's behind the scenes work, but it's work that makes the classroom function better. It helps the teacher. And so I spend so much time on it because I know that this work matters to what my kids are actually experiencing in the classrooms. And I know it helps teachers. And, all of the standards, whether it's EdFi or IMS, they're not competing standards. EdFi focuses more on macro level standards with like ESSA accountability. IMS focuses more on micro level standards for the web applications that are used more on a daily basis in the classroom. And, they're both free open source standards. There is a membership you can choose to join IMS, and that membership gives you one person in your district access to, it pays for basically 2 conferences a year. So for me, it's very worth it because of the networking. But, just as Pete said, get involved, have a means if you can't do everything. So pick some people who, can be involved in your organization, people who understand the technical aspect of the work, but more importantly, why it matters for what takes place in the classroom. And, just get started. And you'll have amazing network experiences with whether it's with EdFi or IMS, Project Unicorn. Get involved. These are people who get what it means to work for teachers and for students in an easy to use way. And it's really amazing to listen to how people are using the same standards, but their ecosystems can look so different, and they're doing great things for kids, and you learn so much from each other. It's valuable work.
Excellent. Yeah, and also standards change as well. I mean, XAPI, things didn't exist. We didn't, as it's important to be there on the ground floor. One, I don't know if you saw the comment there about LRMI. That's a tagging standard that I think is aligned with other standards. And there's just a question from from Martin about, is anybody using that tagging standard? Are they seeing value with it? My understanding is it's more for web use, but that may not be correct. I don't know if anyone has more information or experience with it, type in, or any other panelists are welcome to chime in on that. So we touched on this question, in some answers for the others, which is, how is your district addressing interoperability and open standards in the procurement process? What we found with the COSIN annual survey is that increasingly the tech leaders are involved, and in some cases are the final word on whether technology can be adopted. Academic technology can be provided, because if it's the most wonderful solution, as Pete mentioned earlier, but it doesn't interoperate, no one can access it, it's not all that wonderful. So we are seeing a change, on the higher ed level, on the higher level. So I guess, Pete, can you talk a little bit more about how your district addresses, in your procurement process? What's the processes that you use?
Well, I don't know that ours are perfect, and I've answered some of this already, but frankly, we I think one of the great things of organizations like COSIN is that it connects you with other people, and to the point I think Barbara made in terms of the networking, that's very significant. And so, in terms of this, we really got started when we saw that Houston ISD created really a notice that they put out to all their vendors, saying we are moving to IMS Global and its standards for all of our adoptions, and if you don't comply, we're not too interested in hearing from you. I mean, that was said in 3 pages and much better than I just said it now, but we used some of that information in creating some documents that we work with vendors on, just to sort of set the table and say, I know in the past you came to us and said, here's what we'll offer you, take it or leave it. What we're saying is, here's what we're looking for now. And we need you to decide if you're going to come up to speed and provide, common cartridge or LTI or not. And if you're not, then that's okay. We'll just move on to the next organization that might provide that to us. So I think a lot of it is just agreeing internally to set the standard for yourself as a district. And in the end, although it is a lift, it's not any more of a lift. As a matter of fact, it's a lift that has hope attached to it, as opposed to just continuing to respond to all these disparate ways of rostering and providing access.
Okay. Barbara, you had provided some resources from your district, and let me just a software rubric and a technology form. So we have, again, we'll provide these as our follow-up, but can you just talk through the slides that you have and let me know when you want me to advance?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and let me just start with a short story. And this was about our second year into interoperability. Our instructional team made a purchase of some really solid curriculum with a web application, but that vendor wasn't yet ready for One Roster or the interoperability. And our teachers did not use it, even though it was really expensive. And over the course of that year, the vendor did come on board with One Roster, so that the single sign-on worked and the rostering worked, and it kind of did what our teachers just say is like the voodoo magic that takes place behind the scenes. But in that process, what we learned was once you give teachers interoperable web applications where single sign-on works and the rostering process is done and they can get data back from it, there just is no going back. The teachers really demand that. So we have a process in place where when teachers want to purchase something, they have like a form that they submit to us and we look at from the instructional and the technical side. But whenever we're making major investments in technology, so for example, this last year, we were looking for a math solution for elementary and middle school. We developed this rubric, which you see here, and together between the IT side and the instructional side, we evaluated the vendors. They came in and presented, and the instructional team was really focused, what you see on this side, content and design. And if you go to the next slide, please, Paula. There was also support, which had more to do with Teacher's Guide and professional development, but also the technical aspects. And we took some of these technical aspects, and if you look at the next slide, actually put it into a form that the IT side used. And this isn't the whole thing, but it shows you some. This is like the product name. Are they members of IMS? Are they certified? What standards do they use? The things that my network engineer cares about, whether it's cloud or server hosted. How do you manage single sign-on? How do you manage rostering? And we were able to, collect this information so that we were making wise decisions for a major purchase that not only was great instructional focus, it had a good instructional focus, was solid, but it also met the standards on the technical side for interoperability that our teachers are now demanding. And so this process of collaborating together is just critical to make decisions that are wise decisions with limited resources that impact students and teachers. We don't want software just because it's interoperable if it's not high quality software. But we don't want high quality software that we're paying for that no one will use because it's not interoperable. And so we're finding more and more of our vendors, I just give a huge shout out to the ed tech market space that is understanding the need for interoperable platforms and are, producing some really solid, instructional and technical resources for us to choose from.
I don't know if you saw, there's a question from Martin about vendors asking for more money to be more interoperable. I mean, certainly legacy materials like Pete described, that they were from one vendor or one provider who, when they developed it, even amongst themselves, they didn't, coordinate. So to make legacy product adhere to standards when they hadn't been is, is a heavy lift. Are you finding as you work with vendors that if they have legacy material, how do you move them along the continuum and not have to pay for them to?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think for us, we took a long-term view on building an interoperable ecosystem. So we in South Carolina, our textbooks, for example, are procured and paid for at the state level, which means we're on the state's timeline, and the textbooks last 7 to 8 years before there's funding to replace them. Well, it's unrealistic to ask a vendor to replace a 7-year-old textbook that's going to be up for adoption in 2 years, to make that platform interoperable, to give us common cartridge with it. So, and we're not willing to pay for it in our district. So some things we just live with until we get to where we know we can make a decision in 2 years, when the state will fund, say, physical science textbooks. And we know that when that time comes for us to make that choice, we're going to choose something with high quality instructional content that also meets interoperability standards. So legacy software is going to cost a lot of money to make interoperable. And sometimes it's not, and I don't say it's not worth it. It's worth it if you have the money, but you may have to take a long-term view of building your ecosystem, that as you bring things on, you will have digital resources that are interoperable, that are high quality, and be realistic with your vendors that if you want it now, you probably are going to have to pay for it. But when you're in the procurement stage, just as Pete was saying, you can demand that of them now because they don't have your money yet. And so you should not be charged for any interoperability for a current system to meet the interoperability standards, because they're open source standards. So I don't know if that answered that or not.
I might add something to that, and that is we have been schnookered. And so you need to be careful, because sometimes a vendor will say that they will do X, but you need to make sure that you have systems in place in your contract to make sure that they do that thing. A lot of times they'll say, yeah, we're LTI compliant and we'll give you a common cartridge or whatever, but then what they provide is really a very minimal product, and that wasn't what you were thinking you were going to get. So I think it's really important to build that into your contract with them.
Yes.
That you have options.
Pete, that's a great point. And I will point out that another advantage to membership in IMS is access to their One Ed Tech platform. And the One Ed Tech platform lets you upload like your rostering data and compare it against any vendor that you're looking to add to your digital ecosystem to see how the rostering files will work. And the next thing that IMS is working on is building common cartridge into the One Ed Tech environment, so that you can test your common cartridges against, for example, Schoology or Canvas, your LMS, or Safari Montage. And so it's helpful to sometimes be able to test things before you purchase, but absolutely have something in your procurement contract that holds their feet to the fire of, making sure that they've lived up to their expectations, and then looking at seeing if the product is, conformance certified is important as well.
And I'll just give a shout out for the interoperability toolkit. We do have a resource on RFP guidelines. So COSIN has its own list of considerations when you're looking at new product, and we have some links out to other resources, as you guys have mentioned. As you said, legacy product, it's very hard and expensive to retrofit, and may not be the best way to spend everybody's time and money, but certainly new product that come in, you could certainly have that requirement that they, adhere to the standards within your district. We just have about 4 minutes left, so I just want to give each of you a chance. Your word of wisdoms. Do you have any one piece of advice or a key takeaway? We've shared a lot of information, but is there anything that you would want to make sure that if you do this one thing, that would be your word of wisdom for the participants on this webinar?
I would just recommend that people just get started. look at the interoperability maturity model, kind of do a self-reflection for yourself and see where you are. And then Barbara and Pete had a lot better things to share, so I'm going to let them take this off. But, just keep working on it and keep moving forward.
No, I think you hit it right there. I think you start with look at the maturity model, and then what are your next 3 steps? And then if you want to get into it, start talking about how do we cross the aisle. And we like to call it blurring of the lanes. If you think about a track, it's got these lanes, and you really need to work more towards blurring the lines between the lanes of curriculum instruction assessment and the IT services team. There has to be a coming together. There is going to be some crossing over across what would be seen as a line, and that has to happen. And you have to have ways of dealing with kind of the ouchiness of someone stepping into your turf a little bit, but that's the only way you can move forward. So I think that's my biggest tip is blur the lanes and then pick your next 3 steps from the maturity model.
And I completely agree with Chris and with Pete. And you have to work with instruction. That would be the most critical first step. And it's going to be messy and a little chaotic. Instruction is going to always push the boundaries of technology. And our job is to try to think, how can we say yes? We think the interoperability standards help us say yes more often than to say no. And just get started. Try to look at the maturity model, see what it is that you need to learn, and make a first step. So whether it's adopting single sign-on or pushing your main vendors toward one roster, trying to get an LTI link into your learning management system, but make a step and understand that this is at least a 3 to 7 year venture. So you're not going to get to level 5 on the maturity model in 1 year, and be patient with yourself as you get there.
Thank you. We just have 1 minute left. What I'm going to do to see, I'm just going to leave up everybody's contact information so you can follow up directly with anyone if you've got questions, or to me, and we I'll coalesce and send them out to the group. We did have one last question from Martin about state agencies. And I don't know that we have time to answer that on the call, but I would direct you to take a look at the Michigan Data Hub. We do have a link to it on the interoperability toolkit. It's on the cost calculator area, and they had done an ROI study on the lack of interoperability, and that led them to make some statewide decisions in terms of how they would, source new products. So I just encourage you to take a look at that. And I guess with that, we're at the top of the hour. So I do want to thank everybody, especially our panelists. Everyone's so busy. Some of you are already at other meetings, jumping off to those. So I really appreciate your time and willingness to share your insights about, the moving along the continuum of interoperability. Thanks, everyone.